Welcome to today's Explainer. I am super excited about this one because honestly, we're doing something a little bit different. You know, if you've ever felt like studying economics vocabulary is kind of like reading a dictionary in the dark, well, you're absolutely in the right place. Today, we're going to learn 20 highly advanced IELTS economic words, and we're going to do it through a really simple, really funny story. We're talking about Legos, we're talking about dog shoes, and we're talking about mastering complex vocabulary without even realizing you're studying. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's a quick roadmap of what we're covering. First, welcome to Green City. Second, the 20 star words. Third, Barnaby's Green Adventure. And finally, we'll wrap up with a quick fill-in-the-blanks test.
All right, Section 1. Welcome to Green City, learning big words through a funny story.
So, here's the secret sauce for what we're doing today. We're going to use extremely simple, everyday English to tell a story about a clumsy guy named Barnaby. Now, Barnaby is the kind of guy who literally trips over his own feet, but he's got this massive, world-changing dream. And what we're going to do is inject 20 complex, high-level star words right into his world. By keeping the background stories super simple, those big academic words are going to completely stand out, grab your attention, and stick in your memory like glue.
Moving on to Section 2. The 20 star words. Your vocabulary toolkit.
Okay, to make the story flow perfectly later, let's just front-load the cognitive work right now. First up, infrastructure. Just think of the basic systems a city needs to run, like roads, water pipes, and power lines. Next is investment. That's money you put into a project right now, hoping to make more money later. Then we have fluctuation. This is the up and down movement of things, like prices bouncing all over the place. Inflation, well, that's when the price of everyday things goes up so your money actually buys less. And finally, sustainable, meaning something that's really good for nature and can just keep going for a very long time.
All right, building on those, revenue is basically all the money a company brings in from selling things. A subsidy is a super helpful boost of money, usually coming from the government, to help a business survive or grow. Then there's globalization. That just means countries all over the world connecting and doing business together. Now, notice how these last two concepts are total opposites. Prosperity means being rich, thriving, completely successful. The exact opposite of that is a recession, which is a really bad time for the economy where businesses close down and there are almost no jobs.
Moving along, an entrepreneur is a brave person who takes a huge risk to start a brand new business. Fiscal is just a fancy formal word for anything related to government money, spending, and taxes. Debt is simply money you owe, period. Now, what's really interesting here is how these next two concepts balance each other out like a seesaw. An asset is something valuable you actually own, like a house or a car. A liability, on the other hand, is something that takes money away from you, like a debt or an unpaid bill. Obviously, you always want way more assets than liabilities.
And here are our final building blocks. Monopoly happens when only one single person or company controls and sells everything in a market. Literally zero competition. Equity is your piece of the pie, your actual ownership share in a company. Expenditure is exactly what it sounds like, the money you spend or pay out. Profitability is the measure of how much actual profit a business can make. And finally, capital. This is the large, heavy amount of money you need just to get a big project off the ground in the first place, so keep your ears open for these.
Section 3. Barnaby's Green Adventure. An unbroken tale of Legos and economics.
So listen closely for those star words we just talked about. Now, Barnaby was not your normal entrepreneur. Actually, scratch that. He was the kind of man who accidentally locked himself in his own office on a regular basis. But Barnaby had this big, beautiful dream. He desperately wanted to build a sustainable city where even the toilets produced electricity. "I need capital," he'd shout at his cat.
But Barnaby had a pretty massive problem. He was drowning in debt. Why? Well, because he once tried to sell shoes for dogs. Yeah, it was a complete and utter disaster. Turns out, dogs absolutely hated them. So his only asset in the entire world was an old, rusty bicycle. Every single other thing in his house was a liability.
So, Barnaby put on his absolute best suit and marched down to the great bank to ask for a loan. The banker just stared at him over his glasses. "The world is in a recession," the banker said in this incredibly deep, serious voice. "Inflation is high, and the price of coffee has a daily fluctuation. Why in the world should I give you money?" Barnaby just smiled this huge, goofy smile. "Because I have a fiscal plan. I'm going to build a city of the future. The infrastructure will be made entirely out of recycled Legos." Well, let me tell you, the banker laughed so hard he literally fell out of his chair.
But then, the absolute strangest thing happened. The government caught wind of Barnaby's crazy Lego City idea. And guess what? They actually wanted to support green projects. So they swooped in and gave Barnaby a huge subsidy. And just like that, with that government money, Barnaby's company, Green Brick, was officially born.
He still needed just a tiny bit more help to get things rolling, so he sold some equity in his company to his closest friends. And get this, he sold those ownership shares for just $5.
Then, suddenly, the idea spread like wildfire. Because of globalization, the whole world was connected. People all the way in Japan and Turkey were seeing these incredible, colorful Lego houses pop up on the internet, and they just had to buy them.
And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the guy's genius. His expenditure was basically just buying massive mountains of pizza for his workers to keep them happy, but his revenue from all those global sales, it was shooting straight through the roof, massively higher than his costs.
Pretty soon, Barnaby became a total local hero. Now, he didn't have a monopoly. Other people definitely tried to copy his Lego idea, but his profitability was still absolutely amazing. He brought real, tangible prosperity to his tiny small town. He wasn't just some clumsy guy yelling at his cat anymore. He was a green empire genius who turned a small investment into a massive success. And hey, he even finally paid off that dog shoe debt. Well, mostly anyway.
All right, Section 4, Fill in the Blanks test. Check your memory. Let's see what you've got.
Let's see just how well those words actually stuck in your brain. I'm going to read a sentence, and I want you to literally shout out the correct star word for the blank space before we get to the answers. Ready? Okay, let's go. Sentence 1. He needed a huge amount of blank to build his city. Sentence 2. The banker said the economy was in a bad blank where there were no jobs. Sentence 3. Barnaby received government money to help him, which is called a blank. Sentence 4. His only valuable thing, or blank, was a rusty bicycle. And sentence 5. He brought wealth and blank to his small town. Okay, got your answers locked in? Let's see how you did. Number 1 is capital. Number 2 is recession. Number 3 is subsidy. Number 4 is asset. And number 5 is prosperity. If you got all of those right, massive congratulations to you. You are officially mastering some incredibly high-level economic vocabulary.
Just look at what we accomplished today. You literally just learned the vocabulary of global finance, and all it took was a clumsy guy, a judgmental banker, and some recycled Legos. It just goes to show you that complex economics becomes wonderfully simple when you just wrap it in a good story. So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. What other insanely complex, terrifying subjects out there could you completely master right now if you just turn them into a simple story about a guy yelling at his cat? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you